Hey Crimson Team, this is part 2 of the Earth Science Review on plate tectonics. We talked about how the Earth is made up of many different lithospheric plates. Some of the plates are oceanic, some are continental, and some are a combination of two, both the ocean and the continents. We said that there are 3 different types of plate boundaries. The ones circled in blue are divergent boundaries, or boundaries that are separating. The ones circled in red are convergent boundaries, or plates that are coming together. And the one in green is a transform boundary where plates slide past one another. We began by talking about the mid-ocean ridge, which is an undersea mountain chain where new ocean floor is produced. This occurs at a divergent boundary. Mid-ocean ridge is represented by the green lines. We did an activity in the back of the room with our shoes on the tables where we brought a pair of shoes up in the middle of the 2 tables and pushed them to one side and kept doing that until the other shoes fell off the end of the table. This was an example of seafloor spreading. The seafloor spreads apart along both sides of a mid-ocean ridge and new crust is added. As the new crust gets added and cools, the older crust gets pushed further and further away. Therefore, the seafloor closest to the mid-ocean ridge is youngest, while the seafloor furthest away is the oldest. It's kind of like a conveyor belt or a treadmill. If you look at this picture again, you see the newly formed oceanic crust is closest to the mid-ocean ridge, while the older crust is further away. Eventually, the older ocean crust will subduct under either a continental or oceanic crust because the older ocean crust is more dense than the continental crust. We talked about 6 different kinds of boundaries, and we're going to go over each one, and you can try to see if you can write down what each of the types of boundaries form. The first boundary was continental divergent boundary, when 2 continental plates are coming apart. See if you can take a second and write down what kind of landforms this makes. Okay, you should have known that it made rift valleys, like the African Rift Valley, and it also makes volcanoes. The next type of boundary is divergent again, coming apart, but it's 2 oceanic plates. Again, see if you could figure out what kind of landforms are made. You should have remembered that mid-ocean ridges are formed, and also at the end, trenches are formed. Now we're going to move on to convergent boundaries. There's 3 different types of convergent boundaries. And remember, you have continental plates and oceanic plates. The first type of convergent boundary is continental-continental. Again, what kind of landform does a continental-continental boundary form? You should have written down mountains. Both of the continental crusts are the same density, so neither one subducts under the other. So they just squish together and make mountains. The next kind of convergent boundary is oceanic-oceanic. Again, see if you can figure out what type of landform is made. In this case, one of the ocean crusts is older than the other crust, so the older crust is more dense. So the older crust subducts under the younger crust, and island arcs and volcanoes are made. The next kind of boundary is convergent boundary. It's oceanic continental. Again, see if you can figure out what landforms it makes. You should remember that the oceanic crust is more dense than the continental crust, so the oceanic crust sinks under the continental crust or subducts. Volcanoes and trenches are formed. The last boundary is transform. Transform boundaries slip past one another, and that's where earthquakes occur.